Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to episode 25. Inshallah, in today's episode, we are going to be discussing home education. Now, home education is something that existed from a long time ago when families chose to educate their children at home, basically. And in COVID, a couple of years ago, we were obviously hit with the COVID pandemic. And during COVID time, a lot of families decided that they were going to home educate their children after COVID as well. So there's families like mine who were home educating before COVID, and there's a lot more that started doing it after. So we definitely saw increase in numbers, especially here in the UK. There are now thousands of families that home educate. So we're just going to be looking at some of the advantages and disadvantages of home education. So first of all, the advantages of home education. So as I've said, when we talk about home education, we're talking about when parents choose to take their children out of school and they are responsible for their education themselves. Okay. So some of the advantages are there's obviously flexibility, and this is one of the biggest advantages that parents will tell you of children that home educate. There's a lot of flexibility in terms of your day-to-day time and routine, in terms of when you are going to do the actual educating, what time you're going to do it, which days you're going to do it from the week, whether you're going to do it on the weekdays, the weekends, or all the time. And also the actual curriculum that you're going to follow. Obviously, you're not in a school, so you've got huge flexibility in terms of whether you're going to follow a religious curriculum, in terms of whether you're going to follow a traditional curriculum, whether you are going to teach the children yourself or allow them to self-study, and even down to the specific subjects that you choose. So your traditional subjects like maths, English, science, and other subjects like languages, it's completely up to you to choose. There's a huge amount of flexibility. So you might notice that children can then do subjects that they didn't study at school, for example, or even study subjects in a lot more depth than they would have at school. And it might be that there was a subject that your child didn't enjoy when they were at school because they were doing it in a specific way or a specific curriculum. The teacher wouldn't have time to be flexible to adapt it to every single child's needs. But at home, you can't do this. Another thing is the customization of the curriculum. Okay, so this can create a really enjoyable learning experience for the child. So say, for example, you were teaching them maths. You can decide exactly how you're going to teach them. If it's going to be more hands-on learning rather than theoretical learning, for example, if you're going to take weeks and weeks till they've mastered a topic before moving on, or the other way around, you can move them on really quickly if they've mastered a topic really quickly, instead of having to, like they would at school, wait till everybody else has completed that topic. Another advantage is the family bonding, because you are with your children a lot more than you would have been if they're at school. Think about how many hours in one day they spend in the school, and then they come home, then they're quite tired, and you might have other extracurricular activities that they go to. You don't actually spend a huge amount of time with them from Monday through to Sunday if you look at it in terms of hours across the whole week. Whereas if you're home educating, then you do spend a lot more time with them as well, and this can really strengthen your relationship with them and create a lot more bonding time with them for your whole family, and create a positive family dynamic. Another thing is safety. Now, there's things that children might be exposed to at school, and indeed there might be some parents who actually choose to home educate because of safety issues. So we're talking about things like bullying. We're talking about things like the children not fitting in for whatever reason. We're talking about any other risks that they might be exposed to. We're talking about when children are exposed to certain things in the curriculum which you as a family are happy with for religious or cultural reasons. You don't want the children to learn those topics that might be controversial or might not align with your faith and your values, but you have no choice because it's mandatory for them to do those things at school. So that's another advantage of having them home educate. Now, I'm not going to lie and pretend there's no disadvantages, because there are some. So you need to think about these as well if home education is something that you're thinking about. one of the huge things that people who don't home educate assume is that children have limited social interaction. Okay, and obviously, naturally, especially if, say, you're an only child, or even if you have just a couple of children, it might be that if they're at home, they don't have that social interaction that they might do if they're in a class of, say, 30 children. But actually, you would find that a lot of children who are home educated do attend a lot of groups. So we do this as a family, for example, and we even take our children to the masjid. We take them to a lot of events. They take part in the events. They lead a lot of events. So it ends up being that children you would often find who are home educated probably meet a more variety of different children from, or even adults from different ages, different backgrounds than they would do if they're at school. So this is often not really a disadvantage. There are families who might find this tricky, or depending on where they live, if they live in really rural areas, or if they live in areas where, they want to take their children to particular groups that don't happen. This is something to think about. But certainly in a lot of areas, for example, in the city we live in, there are a lot of really successful groups set up where you do have that interaction with others. Another thing is resources. So the first thing people often ask when thinking about home education, or at least that I've been asked, is where do you get the books and the resources from? So we do live in a day and age where a lot of things are available online. A lot of resources are available for free. There are paid resources that you can access, but it's not like school in the sense that you go in and the child has access to all the resources and you don't need to worry about it. You do need to think about which resources you're going to use and where you're going to get them from. And it completely depends on the subject that you're thinking about, the area of learning that you're thinking about. You might not even need a huge amount of resources, or you might already have more resources than you think. You just need to find out how to get them, where to get them, whether they're age appropriate, whether it's the appropriate subject matter that you want to teach, etc. But that's something that you have to then go out and look for and find. Another one is time and effort. So home education does require a great deal of time and effort, both from yourself and from the child as well. So we would say usually you need at least one parent that's going to be able to give that child the time. Obviously, children do a lot of self-learning and independent learning, but it should always be that there's a parent around if they need them, or at least a parent that's overseeing what it is that they're doing. So this would take a commitment on part of one of the parents. Or if it's not the parent, somebody else that you trust that can do that role. Another thing is some people think that you need to have certain qualifications. Again, a lot of the time you don't, and I would say it's a myth. It depends on what subject it is. For example, if you're not an expert in a particular subject, you can easily find somebody who is, in the same way you might do if your child's at school and they're struggling to find a tutor, for example. You might find a tutor for them, or you might go online and find resources for them. You might find a program for them. So that's something, again, that you would have to go out and find if you feel that you're not confident enough to teach your child yourself. So like any other form of education, home education has its advantages and disadvantages, but it's up to you as a family to weigh the pros and cons, as you would do when you're deciding, if you're deciding, for example, what school to send them, according to your needs and your circumstances. So it's really important at the end of the day to do what's best for your family, what works for your family, in order for your child to succeed, not only in education, but beyond formula education. So we're not just talking about making sure that the child learns traditional subjects, like I've said, like English, math, science, but also make sure the child's healthy, physically healthy, mentally healthy. Is it good for their mental well-being? Are they forming really successful relationships, which should be important for them later on, with peers that you're happy with and that they're happy with, that share your values, etc. All this is really important as well, and it's, worth taking into account. I hope you found this useful, inshallah, and I will see you next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.